we go. It is 7:01, so I'm just going to talk for a couple of minutes while everybody else signs in. Um, and it'll give you a sense of the flavor of the evening. Good to see you all. I'm seeing some very familiar faces here. Welcome to Bird's Books and our fourth Battle of the Books. We've had 2 actual and 2 virtual. This is our second virtual. For those of you who are out of the area, my name is Alice Hutchinson and I'm the owner of Bird's Books. Ours is a small, nearly 9-year-old family-owned independent bookstore in downtown Bethel, Connecticut. Right now we are doing online ordering with curbside pickup and shopping, some shipping, but have opened to 3 patrons or 1 family group at a time. If you want to know more, please visit our website at birdsbooks.com, where we keep our status updated right on the front page. We first hosted Battle of the Books live in a bookstore before an audience. Jim Mustich continues the enthusiasm for his book, 1,000 Books to Read Before You Die. This one here. By facilitating this event where 5 people are offered the chance to present a book to a crowd and an audience chooses the book they would most like to read. This is our 4th battle, as I've said before, and we're grateful that all of you are here with us tonight. In this virtual environment, we both decided that the battle could work and could include folks from all over the country, which enriches this offering. Each of you who registered will get an email tomorrow that includes information on all of the books presented tonight, the link to Jim's website, the Company of Books, and a link to the video of tonight's battle. So here's how things are going to go tonight. First, I will introduce Jim. Jim will speak and introduce each of the 5 presenters. Each of those 5 presenters will get 4 minutes to pitch their book as the book we should read. Jim's wife, Margot, will time the presenters. Margot, your cue. She's not there. Oh, there it is, the little ding. And at the end of the presentations, we vote. The winner of the battle receives a copy of 1,000 Books to Read Before You Die, donated and signed by the author. The runner-up is invited to pitch the book at the next Battle of the Books. Then we all vote. As you are voting, Jim and I will each share what the 2 of us are reading. But before we share the results of the voting and congratulate the winner, we have some door prizes to give away. Each of the 5 participants will get, pardon me, the new 2021 Page a Day calendar. These are great. One of the things we did, for some of you may be here because as you came into the store, we took the 2020 calendar, asked you your birthday, gave you the page, wrote the date of this event on the back and handed it to you as a reminder. So it's wonderful. You get a book every single day of the year. We ask that you please remain muted tonight and please use the chat. For those of you who may be signing on late, the chat is the button at the bottom of your page. You just click on it, it opens up a screen to the right. So you can type in questions, comments, cheer for your friends, do whatever, say whatever you like. Oh, my son Stephen is going to be tracking the chat. So if you type a question there, he'll be sure to go back and revisit it. So if we have a chance to ask questions at the end, he'll be the one who will keep track of that. So now I'd like to introduce you to Jim Mustich. James Mustich began his career in bookselling at an independent bookstore in Briarcliff Manor, New York, in the early 1980s. In 1986, he co-founded the acclaimed book catalog, A Common Reader. It was for 2 decades its guiding force. He subsequently has worked as an editorial and product development executive in the publishing industry. He lives with his wife, Margot, in Connecticut. Jim, I turn it over to you.
Alice, thank you very much. We should say that our 5 contestants tonight are alums from previous battles of the books. So they have honed their craft specifically for tonight. I'm happy to be here, and it's a little unnerving to speak to many folks remotely, but it's also a nice metaphor for the way the company of books can nourish both solitude and company. I spent a long time writing my book, the 1,000 pages long, called 1,000 Books to Read Before You Die. Its subtitle is A Life-Changing List, and while that may seem a little dramatic, it speaks to the faith at the core of my work as a bookseller over the past 40 years. And I bring it up now, as I did last time, to salute our host, Alice Hutchinson, who embodies, as well as anyone I know, the steadfast sense of mission that animates all devoted booksellers. This was best expressed by a character named Roger Mifflin, who was the protagonist of Christopher Morley's novel, The Haunted Bookshop. Mifflin says, "Our vocation as booksellers is to spread good books about, to sow them on fertile minds, to propagate understanding and a carefulness of life and beauty." I'm saying that again, as I did last time, because I know how hard it is to do this work in good times, and to continue to do it during a pandemic requires courage as well as culture and commercial savvy. So thank you, Alice and Steve, for keeping books before us in Birds and for having us together. Let me quickly tell you how these battles of the books came about. As I said, I spent a long time writing 1,000 Books to Read Before You Die. And when it was finally published just about 2 years ago, Margot and I traveled around the country talking about it in bookstores and libraries. And having spent 14 years writing it, I quickly realized I was going to spend the next 14 hearing from readers what I'd gotten wrong, what I'd left out, the mistaken choices I'd made, and so on. But those were the best part of those events, actually, with the Q&A in the audience, when people would start to talk about their favorite books and why they thought everyone should read those. I kind of suspected this. In the introduction to the book, I wrote the following: "This book is neither comprehensive nor authoritative, nor is it meant to be. It is meant to be an invitation to a conversation, even a merry argument, about the books and authors that are missing, as well as the books and authors included. Because the question of what to read next is the best prelude to even more important ones, like who to be and how to live." Those merry arguments that happened after all of my book talks in all the venues we visited, and at one point, Margot had the inspired idea that we should make them their own event. Thus, the Battle of the Books were born, leading us to communities where local readers, celebrities, and luminaries could share their own favorite books with us and their neighbors. Which brings us to tonight's event, and let's get to it. We have 5 contestants doing battles tonight: Elizabeth Allen, Rick Magee, Cara DeBartolo, Rebecca Myers, and Chris Durante. As I said, they're experienced hands in this format, so we expect perfection. I will introduce them one by one, and they will speak for 4 minutes, as Alice said, about a book I left off my list. Margot will keep time. After all 5 have pitched their books, you'll be able to cast your vote for who was most convincing. Up first is Elizabeth Allen. Though she may have a degree and job in an unrelated field, Elizabeth Allen dreams of being paid to be bookish. So do Alice and I, but that's another story. Until that opportunity comes a knocking, she spends her free time writing for Book Riot and managing Black, White, and Red Books, a blog centering around the literary references in the hit television series Gilmore Girls. She also is an avid participant in the Birds Book monthly book group. She lives in Newtown with her husband Jason, precocious 7-year-old daughter Lorelei, and cat Gretchen Wieners. In our first Birds battle in July 2019, Elizabeth was runner-up when she made a case for The Giver by Lois Lowry. In our second Birds battle, on December 13th, 2019, she spoke about The Glass Castle by Jeanette Walls. Let's hope the third time will be the charm, Elizabeth. Her book tonight is The Nickel Boys by Colson Whitehead. Take it away.
All right, thanks to Margot, Jim, and the wonderful friends and family of Bird's Books. There were 4 ways out of Nickel. Nickel Academy opened in 1900, originally dubbed the Florida State Reform School, and home to over 600 boys during its existence. A facility an hour west of Tallahassee, Nickel was segregated. The white boys housed in the less rundown buildings up the hill, the black boys relegated to whatever was left over. 1, serve your time. You get along and you'll get along. Sage words of wisdom from the officer as Black teenager Elwood Curtis begins his journey as a student at the Nickel Academy, a victim of circumstance at the height of the Civil Rights Movement. Feeling lucky that he had been sent to a school instead of a juvenile detention center, Elwood entered the doors of Nickel confident that he would get along, leave Nickel in due time, and continue on with his plans for a future in education and activism. Part of getting along in a situation like this is the friends that make the time served more bearable. Jack Turner was that for Elwood. This is Turner's second stint at the academy, and his time there initially taught him that friendships in places like this are nothing more than a liability. But he and Elwood, although 2 opposite sides, find themselves to be of the same coin. They continue to serve their time in Nickel together. 2, the court might intervene. Unsurprisingly, the court always seems to successfully intervene when it comes to the future of a young white man. And as is true today, the court will intervene for a price. While Elwood is lucky to be supported by several people working tirelessly to remove him from his reform school, young men like Turner aren't so lucky. Turner wasn't afforded hope of leaving Nickel early. He understood all too well that option number 2 wasn't open to him. 3, you could die. The Black boys at Nickel name it simply the White House. Ripped out of their beds in the middle of the night over a real or perceived infraction, the Nickel boys were thrown on a single mattress, stained brown from the blood of decades of abuse and rape in a building that amounted to no more than a dilapidated shed. A giant industrial fan, purloined from the laundry room, was used to drown out their screams. Some survived, and some didn't. Decades later, what the boys referred to as Boot Hill was discovered simply because an archaeology student thought the earth just over the big slope on the north campus looked wrong. Archaeology students unearthed the remains of 43 humans, 7 of which would go unidentified. 4, you could run. The legends of those who had successfully escaped Nickel were all some of the boys had to cling to. Stories of daring escapes through the swamp, rumors of the best way to avoid the dogs and the guards. So many of the boys could only hope that these stories were grounded in reality. And the reality is this. Colson Whitehead came across the story of the Arthur G. Dozier School for Boys in 2014 during the summer of Ferguson and the deaths of Michael Brown and Eric Garner. The powerlessness Whitehead already felt at the systemic racism and violence against brown and Black bodies birthed the follow-up to his Pulitzer Prize-winning The Underground Railroad. In its 111 years of operation in Marianna, Florida, Dozier had a reputation for physical and sexual abuse. Occasionally, reports of inadequate conditions and overcrowding would surface, but Dozier remained in operation for over a century. And as it turns out, the White House was real. The White House Boys is a group of approximately 300 men that survived their times as students at the Dozier School in the 50s and 60s. Starting in the early 2000s, members of the group started to speak out about their experiences and the abuse they suffered at the hands of the facility. A quick Google search of the White House and the Dozier grounds will easily call to mind the violence that occurred within its dingy walls. Boot Hill was real too. An investigation ordered in 2009 uncovered its existence. At least 50 graves and nearly 100 deaths were discovered on the grounds. Oh, so close. So close.
Elizabeth, thank you very, very much. That's a very powerful book. I read about the Underground Railroad, Whitehead's previous novel, in 1,000 books, and his new one has received a great deal of acclaim. So thank you for bringing it to everyone's attention. Next up, we have Rick Magee. Rick grew up in California and got his BA in English at UC Berkeley and his MA in English at Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. He moved to the East Coast to get his doctorate in English at Fordham. He's been teaching English at Sacred Heart University since 2003, where he teaches a wide variety of literature and writing classes. Most recently, he taught a class of a class on food writing in Rome. Be still my heart. And he frequently teaches a creative writing class in Ireland. He has a book out on Gothic lit called The Haunted Muse, and he's working on a book about fatherhood. He also writes an excellent monthly column for the Danbury News Times. He lives in Bethel with his wife, Rebecca, who teaches English at Norwalk Community College, and his son, Cormac, who is in the 2nd grade. In a previous Birds battle, he made the case for Tana French's twisty thriller, The Witch Elm. His book tonight is We Ride Upon Sticks by Quan Barry. Rick, all yours.
Great, thank you. I'm excited to do this. I've been recommending this book to anybody who will get within grabbing distance. So I'm happy to talk about this. Back in college, I read John Updike's Witches of Eastwick, and I liked it a lot. And then I read it again recently, and I thought, it didn't age quite as well as I hoped it would age. And then my wife got me this for my birthday, We Ride Upon Sticks by Quan Barry. It's sort of like The Witches of Eastwick if it were written today by this really cool, interesting woman who's fun and exciting, and it's a great book, and I love everything about it. It's set in 1989, and as a Gen Xer, anything that's set in the 80s, I'm gonna like. And it follows the Danvers women's varsity field hockey team, Danvers High School. And Danvers, of course, is part of the old Salem Village. So you know something witchy is going to happen. The previous year, the field hockey team had gone 2-8, and Mel Boucher, the goalie, not happy about that. So she takes her Emilio Estevez notebook and gets everybody on the team to sign on to it, pledging allegiance to what Heather Houston, who's the team brainiac and right halfback, calls an alternative god. So the book then follows all of the girls and one boy Corey, as they go through their season, and they're aiming for the state championships this year. I'm not going to tell you what happens because that would spoil too much. But it's, in a lot of ways, a coming-of-age story set in the 80s with the big hair and the clothes and the music. But it's a lot more than that. It's about the girls learning to want what they want and not what other people want them to want. It's about them trying to figure out their gender roles and who they're going to be when they grow up and how they're going to act. And all set against the background of the 80s and this crazy, crazy season of field hockey. It's not just this kind of fun story, though. What really makes this book stand out to me is Quan Barry's also a poet, and it shows every page, every sentence. It shows her command of language. Her prose hustles and bops with this midnight energy of the 80s pop songs that we see throughout the story. The DJ starts with the boss playing Born in the USA before spinning Duran Duran's Wild Boys and finishing up with a full 8 minutes and 41 seconds of Purple Rain. It's a funny book. It's a lovely book. It's exhilarating. You got to read it, especially right now. Read about witches right before Halloween. Thank you.
Rick, thank you very much. That's really sums up what this is all about. The best kind of recommendation is when someone you know to be a reader hands you a book and says, you've got to read this. So that's what we're all doing tonight. Our third contestant is Cara DeBartolo. Cara is a wife, mother, UConn alum, and self-proclaimed book nerd. She lives by the Coco Chanel quote, "A girl should be two things, classy and fabulous." And she is both. A former literacy instructional coach for the Bethel Public Schools, she's now the supervisor of special education in the Easton Public Schools. She sprinkles the magic of reading wherever she goes, especially when dressed as the book fairy at Berry School and Rockwell School. When not reading, she can be found playing baseball or Pokemon hunting with her two boys, Drew and Nolan, or chasing their puppy, Elphaba Scarlet Misty DeBartolo, around the yard. Cara's all-time favorite book is Anne of Green Gables. She hopes to visit Prince Edward Island in the near future. At our very first Birds battle, she took the honors with her advocacy for Ms. Bixby's Last Day by John David Anderson. Tonight, she's going to be talking about Stamped Racism, Anti-Racism, and You, a remix of the National Book Award-winning Stamped from the Beginning by Jason Reynolds and Ibram X. Kendi. Cara, all yours.
Great. Thank you so much for inviting me back. So, like Jim said, I'll be promoting the book Stamped. Have you ever read a book ever so quietly in the background, heard the book soundtracked in your mind? As I read Stamped by Jason Reynolds and Ibram X. Kendi, I heard the music from Hamilton. In my mind, the same line repeated over and over: raise a glass to freedom, something they can never take away, from the story of tonight. Reynolds and Kendi, in writing Stamped, make us question what freedom means in the United States. Are all people free? Stamped makes readers question the world as we know it today. But mostly it made me question my childhood. See, I remember the drug wars. I remember when hip hop came out. My 10-year-old mind viewed the drug wars as a great gift to the United States. After all, who doesn't remember? This is your brain. This is your brain on drugs. Sizzle, pop goes the egg. Ironically, drug use was on the decline at that time. Yet somehow I recall thinking marijuana was the worst thing in the world. Reynolds and Kendi, through their intense writing style of short phrases, one-word sentences, and bold text, paint a picture of presidents on drugs. Their drug, addicted to America. Let that sink in. Stamped makes you rethink everything as you know it. Dare I say the Cosbys? Cue Hurricane from Hamilton. History has its eyes on you, from the song Hurricane. Who could imagine a family show about a successful African-American family could be racist? Let that sink in. And I quote, if a Black family did not operate like the Huxtables, they weren't worthy of respect. All the while, I danced and rapped to hip hop songs with my 8th grade friends. I was that white suburban girl listening to hip hop music, which unbeknownst to me was painting African Americans as more violent, more materialistic, and more sexual. I listened to the music secretly because God forbid my mom knew what I listened to. Stamped made me pause, take a deep breath, and reflect on the past, present, and future. This is not a history book. This is a book that implores you to not throw your shot away. Choice is yours. Don't freak out. Just breathe in, inhale, hold it. Now exhale. Now rise up. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. We fought for these ideals, and we shouldn't settle for less. Thomas Jefferson, rise up.
Thank you, Cara.
You're
That was
welcome.
marvelous. Next up, Rebecca Myers, coming to us from Atlanta. In her 72 years, Rebecca has lived in West Virginia, Connecticut, Washington, D.C., New York, Boston, St. Louis, Philadelphia, San Francisco, and finally, and for the past 3 decades, Atlanta. At various times and various places, she has owned a bookstore, worked several jobs in a family homeless shelter, edited a small magazine, run a thrift store, been a teacher, a choir director, an Orthodox priest's wife, a mother of 2 daughters, and a grandmother of 3 wonderful children. That little paragraph is the plot of a next Ann Tyler novel, I think. Currently a widow, she still leads a choir which cannot meet but still sings virtually, is fortunate enough to live with one of her daughters and near the other, has great dogs to keep her walking and laughing, enjoys the Times crosswords, and tries not to buy back all the books she gave away when she moved into her new home last July. I know the feeling.
I'm failing.
It's a hopeless task. Rebecca won our first virtual battle back in July with her advocacy for the wonderful novel A Gentleman in Moscow by Amor Towles. Tonight, she's going to tell us about The Splendid and the Vile by Eric Larson. Rebecca?
Thank you, Jim. Thanks, Alice and Stephen. 2020, what a year. At this point, as there's no discernible end of our troubles in sight, we might be excused if we embrace despondency as a justifiable alternative to perseverance and hope. I found The Splendid and the Vile by Eric Larson to be a rather bracing antidote to this tendency to defeatism. First, I want to read you Larson's explanation or his motivation for writing. It was only when I moved to Manhattan a few years ago that I came to understand with sudden clarity how different the experience of September 11, 2001 had been for New Yorkers than for those of us who watched the nightmare unfold at a distance. This was their home city under attack. Almost immediately, I started thinking about London and the German aerial assault of 1940-41 and wondered how on earth anyone could have endured it. 57 consecutive nights of bombing, followed by intensifying series of nighttime raids over the next 6 months. In particular, I thought about Winston Churchill. How did he withstand it? And his family and friends? What was it like for him to have his city bombed for nights on end and to know full well that these air raids, however horrific, were likely only a preamble for far worse, a German invasion from the sea and sky, with parachutists dropping into his garden, Panzer tanks clanking through Trafalgar Square, and poison gas wafting over the beach where once he painted the sea. The book takes us through the first year of Winston Churchill's era as Prime Minister of Britain, a year in which he must witness the collapse of France, the one ally he expected to rely on, the persistent coyness of the United States in offering support of any substance to the fight, the dominance of the Luftwaffe, whose nightly bombings the RAF was for many reasons unable to discourage, as well as the usual political ups and downs, which at times threatened his position. If you're of my generation, you may feel that you've had enough of being compared unfavorably to the greatest generation. If you're younger than I, you may have moved on from the mythologies we baby boomers grew up with. The specter of Nazism, the horror of the camps, the deprivations and sacrifices made to defeat the totalitarianism of Hitler, Mussolini, and Hirohito. Perhaps it has become cliche to you, but you will not find any cliches here. Letters, diaries, official correspondences become the dialogue in a lively narrative of this extraordinary year in which the island of Britain, and particularly London, was subjected to the most brutal and sustained aerial attack ever mounted. How Churchill led his people through this most punishing and demoralizing blitzkrieg would make for rather depressing reading, were it not for the extraordinary determination, the never say die attitude of the man in charge, and with him, the people he led with unique spirit and eloquence. Jacques Corville, his private secretary, once wrote in his diary, "Whatever Winston's shortcomings, he seems to be the man for the occasion. His spirit is indomitable, and even if France and England should be lost, I feel he would carry on the crusade himself with a band of privateers." There's a picture of him I've lost, just as I envisioned him all my life, larger than life. But Larson allows us to see him as he was seen by his family and friends, and by the people he was determined to defend and who responded to his relentless hope, even as he helped them face the realities of an all but hopeless situation. He is at the center of the story, but he alone is not the story. There are many players, many voices, some famous, some obscure, but in the end, the picture is one in which the people did not simply endure hardship, but rose to meet it and stare it down. Without ever feeling preached at, I felt rather encouraged to buck up and carry on. Without trying to compare our crisis to theirs, I believe we can draw strength and inspiration from the voices of the people who did so, and the man who led them through the times that try men's souls. Thank you.
A timely book. I'll mention that John Colville, who you mentioned, who was his assistant or aide-de-camp, wrote a wonderful book called The Fringes of Power, which is his diaries of working with Churchill, which I write about in 1,000 books, which would be a good companion to The Splendid and the Vile.
He was a bit reluctant to be his assistant for a while,
Yes,
I guess.
exactly. Yeah, that's detailed in the book. Our final contestant tonight is Chris Durante. Chris is an artist, frame maker, husband, educator, and a pretty good chef. Never in his wildest imagination would he ever have thought that all those science fiction and dystopian novels and movies he devoured as a kid would have come to fruition. In a funny way, they have prepared him for this current episode in our culture. Thank you indeed, Dr. Strangelove. Chris has twice been a runner-up at previous Birds battles, First time with Dalva by Jim Harrison, and second time with Smith Henderson's 4th of July Creek. Tonight, he's going to tell us about Hollow Kingdom by Kira Jane Buxton. Chris, let's hear about Hollow Kingdom.
Okay, everybody, hello, and thank you for hosting this again and doing this, and it's always a pleasure to be involved. I feel like Noel from the Great British Baking Show. I have the unfortunate task of recommending a book about a pandemic in the midst of a pandemic. The Hollow Kingdom by Kira Jane Buxton is a wondrously strange and engaging book. One part warning about climate change and its effects on the natural order, one part crazy zombie apocalypse romp through the streets of Seattle, and one part coming of age story. It will have you roaring in laughter one moment and the next weeping uncontrollably. It will both break and mend your heart. Our narrator is a domesticated crow named Shit Turd. Shit Turd has a fondness for Cheetos, the History Channel, and his human, Big Jim. He adores Big Jim and thinks mofos, humans, are just the best. He actually considers himself more human than Crow. After Big Jim's eye falls out, he senses something is amiss in the mofo world. Big Jim stops eating and sequesters himself in the basement away from everything and eventually succumbs to the virus that is turning the denizens of Seattle into walking gore machines. In the full pseudo-confident manner of Holden Caulfield, Shit Turd lights out to find out what is happening. With him is his trusty companion, Dennis, a big, dopey bloodhound. Apparently, dogs are Crow's best friends as well. Together, they roam the streets and neighborhoods of Seattle in search of answers. In their wanderings, Shit Turd and Dennis come face to face with the animal world and its interconnected myriad ways of communicating and protecting each other. Shit Turd's human ways have little sway in this world of aura, echo, and web, names for the animal kingdom's internet. They all work together to protect, restore, and maintain balance in the natural world against the coming changes after humanity's disappearance. Imagine that, animals working together as one. In a funny, twisted way, Shit Turd has to find the humanity he so loves by reinventing himself as a crow. Shit Turd is seen as a sort of seer in the animal world. He's named the one who keeps, and a big task is put upon him. Can he rise to the occasion? The author uses a clever device throughout this book. Every other chapter or so, she introduces us to another corner of the world with an analogous narrative. We hear from a starving polar bear on an ice floe in the suddenly warmer Arctic, an armadillo named Elwood waiting out a brush fire in Atlanta, Georgia, a Highland cow in Scotland reassuring his friend Nubbins, the donkey, that the shepherd will in fact return soon. We see that what is going on in Seattle is happening all over the globe as the animals are setting themselves up to inherit the planet and a whole new set of challenges. This book is told with humor and heart and a heaping dose of pop culture references. Bon Jovi and my favorite, Barbara Streisand. This book is visionary and begging us to pay attention. To what? That's up to us. Read this book. Thank you.
Chris, thank you very much. I'd like to ask all of you listening to give a virtual round of applause to our 5 contestants. And Alice, are we going to activate the poll now?
We're going to activate the poll. If I've set it up correctly, it'll be anonymous, which will give us a chance to have everybody vote. You're going to have, when I share the screen for the 5 book choices, someone's got to tell me whether it lines up okay. So let me activate the voting. Edit. Hang on. Sorry about this. I wanted to make sure that it was anonymous, which didn't quite save correctly, so I've just saved it. Sorry, folks, I just lost my screen. There you are. All right, so the poll's coming up. I'm going to launch the poll, but I'm also going to share the screen with all 5 books. So let's see if they come up at the same time. Okay, you can move around the voting, the poll, right there. All right, and while we're doing all of this, I'm going to ask Jim to tell me what he's reading right now.
I have just finished reading a book called, I've lost my, I can't see myself here anymore, which is probably good because
Someone has circled this. Someone just, Stephen, did you just make a noise? I mean, a circle? I'm sorry, Jim, go ahead. Someone
That's okay.
marked all over this. So I apologize. There we go.
I've just finished reading this book called Borges and Me by Jay Perini. Now, Jay Perini is a poet, a biographer, and a novelist. It's probably his most celebrated book is a novel about Tolstoy called The Last Station, which was made into a movie. And in this book, which is a kind of remembrance of his time in Ireland when he was a graduate student at St. Andrews. And he was called upon to look after the great Argentine writer Jorge Luis Borges, who was visiting Scotland for the first time. And because of some circumstances, Perini was asked to take care of him. And they end up going on a tour of the Scottish Highlands, which Borges was eager to see. Now, as some of you may know, Borges, who in the 1970s was in his 70s, was also blind, but he wanted to see the Highlands. And so Perini had to drive him around and describe what he was looking at. And they go through all sorts of comic adventures, including being capsized on a rowboat on the Loch Ness. And it is just a wonderful book about a road trip, coming of age, about writing and literature and the imagination. And you can see here, I've marked some especially good passages, which I write about in my newsletter, which I encourage all of you to sign up for at our website, 1000bookstoread.com, be coming out on Friday. But this book is totally charming. You don't have to have a previous interest in Borges or in anything, but if you love books, I think you'll find it quite enjoyable and surprising. How about you, Alice? What have you been reading?
Well, thank you. I'm sorry about whatever child broke in on this Zoom call and started scribbling all over the choices of books. We obviously were having some technical difficulty. I'll try and figure it out by the next battle. Sorry. But what I've been reading, and I finished it because it's nice and short, is a book called Cold Moon. And technically this book does not come out until the 27th of October, but we got the opportunity to get it and sell it in advance because we're hosting the author a week from tonight, which is the 28th. And I'm going to read you the review that I wrote in Goodreads, and it takes a lot for me to post in Goodreads because, as we all know, it's an Amazon product. So I tend to be very sparing with anything that doesn't sort of bring everybody back to Bethel. But Cold Moon, initially I chose to read this book because I had ordered the advanced reader's copy and it was on my to-be-read list. I had expressed one of those pandemic blue days, as my daughter calls them. I was stuck in a hopeless place of feeling the sorry state of the world in my life was never going to turn around, a low moment and a slice of time. I needed someone or something to show me the way out without patronizing me. After reading the description and realizing it was a small book, I figured my attention span could handle it. I really was having a bad day. I was immediately absorbed into this rich, fulfilling, substantive little book that turned my spirit around in 98 pages. At times, humorous, personal, and life-affirming, this book took me on a reflection of someone else's life as if it was my own. I'm astonished by the author's ability to remember several occurrences at a young age. Additionally, his memory of events is striking and vivid. A cold moon is the moon right before the winter solstice, the very last moon of the year. At times, I felt as though the book was a kind of self-reflection that one does at the end of one's life or at the gates of heaven. This is an accounting for choices made or directions taken, and a kind of forgiveness that comes out of a deep understanding of the transformative nature of love. I'm so glad to have read this and hope it gets into the hands of a great many people. Cold Moon by Roger Rosenblatt. So there. Well, I think, Stephen, are we just about ready to show the voting? I'm going to get rid of the share screen. Can you excuse me so I can do this? I'm going to stop sharing. And whoever that child was that got in there, I just don't know what that is. And so would you like me to read the results or show the results?
As you wish.
Well,
we might have to send it to the Supreme Court, though, if it's contested.
Tell us about the door
I have to
prizes.
say, it was very, very close. Rick, you pulled it off.
The winner is Rick Magee.
Wow, cool.
And who bewitched everyone with his description of We Ride Upon Sticks by Quan Barry. Rick, congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. It really is a wonderful book.
It sure
And
sounded
so is
like
the
it.
book that you're going to win tonight as the person who came in with the top vote getter. Hi, Cormac.
Just what an English teacher needs.
Oh, it is just what an English teacher needs.
It is. It is. Totally.
It is absolutely.
Congratulations, Rick, and thank you to
you so
all the
much.
contestants. Alice, do we have some door prizes?
We
Or-
actually have some door prizes. We have some great door prizes. And let me pull up, Stephen, have you got the participant list? Because then we can. All right, hang on. We're going to go from smallest up to largest, and there is no, there's no small gift. So there is a wonderful, wonderful 1,000 books to read before you die mug that says, and some tea to go with it. Louisa May Alcott green tea blend. And these are Simpson and Vale teas that are literary teas that Simpson and Vale, a gourmet tea maker, only sells to bookstores. And all of the ingredients are patterned after where the author wrote about or where they lived. So tea and a mug. And Cynthia, I don't know who you are. Who's Cynthia on this? Cynthia, I'm going to write you down. Stephen, you write down Cynthia. Stephen's got you. Tea in a mug. There you go. You unmuted? There you go.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm in Atlanta with Rebecca.
Oh, we'll send it to you when I send Rebecca down her calendar.
Okay.
Awesome. Perfect. Now, the next prize is a great mug, donated also by Jim and his wife, Margot, with William Shakespeare's tea from Simpson and Vale, and this wonderful 1,000 books journal. And this one is a bullet journal. And for those of you who've never used a bullet journal, they're a lot of fun because you can turn them into date books or address books, draw in them, you can do anything you want to. So the next person on this list is Laura Kurtz. Laura? Hi, Laura, unmute yourself. So, well, whatever. I can't hear you at all, but I will look you up and see. You registered, so you're here. So Stephen's written your name down, and we'll get in touch, whether I mail it to you or you come in and pick it up. So we have two more prizes. So this one is a porcelain 1,000 books to read before you die. A set of out-of-print socks, winter reading socks. Also, both those donated by the Mustichs. And Birds Books has donated a $20 gift certificate, good through the end of the year, so that you can come in and get yourself whatever. And it comes with Emily Dickinson tea. So you have mug, tea, warm socks, and you can get yourself going on another book. And Wendy's iPad won. So whoever Wendy's iPad is, oh, Wendy, hi. How are you? Good.
I'm great. This was so much fun.
Oh, great. I'm so glad. And you're a winner. So we'll see you at the store.
Okay, that sounds good.
Great. Thanks. And the grand prize. This is awesome. Okay, Wendy, I'm going to mute you up again.
Yep.
Thank you. The grand prize. 1,000 books to read before you die, 2021, page a day. So you will always have a book idea every single day. But you can also make your 1,000 books to read before you die puzzle. Awesome. Thank you, Jim and Margot. And your 1,000 books to read before you die carry bag. So you can carry all of your books that you get at Birds Books in them and advertise this wonderful book everywhere you go, because you must have read 1,000 books anyway. Your 1,000 books to read before you die journal. So, and this is a bullet journal also. Your lovely mug, the porcelain mug, and a $40 gift certificate to Birds Books, good through the end of the year, so you can fill it all up with books. And let's see who was chosen for this one. Was Anita. Anita, you won. How wonderful. You're such a reader. Anita's a member of my book group. She reads a lot.
That's so cool.
Congratulations.
That's exciting.
Congratulations, everyone.
Hey.
We have almost wrapped it up, Jim.
Let me just say a couple of things.
So it's time for you to sort of wrap it up before I say, well, I'm going to let Jim end the evening, but I'm just going to say thank you all for Zooming in. The Mustichs have been so generous with their time, with your wonderful book, with all of the prizes that were donated this evening come from Jim and Margot Mustich. I really appreciate it. But they're supportive bookstores. They don't have the opportunity to go around the country and do Battle of the Books, and have made it work on a virtual format that is a thrill. It is fun. It's engaging. We learn about new books, but most of all, we get a chance to see each other, talk books without masks on. It's been a lot of fun. So I just want to thank you before you wrap up the evening.
You are very welcome, and I thank all of our contestants again, and all the people in our audience. Just a couple of things before we go. One is, we have built, if you like this kind of thing, we've built a website at 1000bookstoread.com. That's 1000bookstoread.com, where you can see my whole list, bunch of other stuff, but most importantly, you can add your own books, as our contestants did tonight, to the list, and people get to see them. While you're there, you can sign up for my newsletter, where I write about these events and what I'm reading and those kinds of things. Comes out every 2 weeks. So you should check that out. I hope you will. In closing, let me just leave you with a thought. These are trying times, and the next few weeks will probably be even more trying. And it puts me in mind of a passage by the philosopher A.C. Grayling that I've been thinking about a lot lately because it makes me feel better. And maybe it'll do the same for you. It's from a book of his called Meditations for the Humanist. And here's what he writes. Most people tend to think of courage as a warrior virtue, as belonging typically to battle, and therefore, by analogy, to endeavor on the upper slopes of Everest, in the deeps of the sea, and even on the sports field. In other words, wherever endurance, grit, and determination in the face of physical challenges are required. That is true enough. But courage is often demonstrated because it is often needed in greater quantities in daily life. And there are even times when merely to live, as Seneca put it in a letter to Lucilius, is itself an act of courage. While mountaineering and deep sea diving are self-contained activities that last a certain length of time, with, if all goes well, a return to a status quo ante when they are over, facing, say, grief or disappointment is quite different. They are open-ended, new, different dispensations with unforeseeables deeply embedded in them, promising only that much will have to be borne before relief comes. To lie sleepless with pain at night, or to wake every morning and feel the return of grief, yet to get up and carry on as best one can, is courage itself. That's Anthony Grayling. For my part, I'll add, be strong, be well, read good books, support your local bookstore, vote, and good night.
Good night, all. Thank you very much.
Thank you.